There were a lot of naysayers doing the film. I remember the initial line producer who I'd worked with another film was let go because he didn't get along with Terry, and he went back to New York and told my mother, who was really helping me finance the movie, that this film was a mess and, don't waste your money on this. My gut told me to believe in Terry, and I think that was a good lesson. I think I was introduced to Terry through my partner at the time, Paul Williams, who went to Harvard and was a good friend of Jake Brackman's. And Jake was good friends of Terry's back then, and there was a group of people I was very impressed by their intellect and good to be around. And I wanted to make films very, very much. I enjoyed the early experiences of working with Paul Williams, and the kind of partnership that I created with Paul was something I wanted to duplicate again and again. I grew up during the French New Wave and the whole auteur theory. My mission was always to set the context to be on the same side as the filmmaker. My father had died when I was 16, and I helped run the family business, which is what I was supposed to go into. And in return, the toy company gave me the credit to do the first films, including Badlands. They would give us credit at the laboratories and at the equipment houses, so we could use Pressman Toys' credit line to make these films. And so it was through this kind of trade, my helping the family business and the family business helping me. And Terry and I were funding the film with our own meager resources, and we were finding money week to week. And the biggest anxiety was covering the cost, making sure we would be able to keep shooting and have enough money to keep going. I was actually sending money from my account, and my mom would not understand where this money was going. I was, doing things behind her back, and then when she found out, she actually, instead of getting angry, she supported it and doubled down.
Hey, don't touch that. That can go.
The script was very opaque. It was a leap of faith. When I saw the film finished, I was knocked out by it. I'm a big Nat King Cole fan, and every time I see the Blossom Fell scene, it really moves me. I remember that experience because that wasn't in the script, and a lot of things weren't in the script. I worked with Terry very early in my career, so I was learning to work with a very idiosyncratic director, which perhaps I didn't realize at the time was as unique as Terry is and was then. We had a short production schedule, but a very long second unit schedule when Terry went off with a very small crew and spent at least as much time as the full production doing second unit, capturing the nature and the environment around the Badlands area, which was at the time seemed unusual and provocative, but in hindsight it was very smart. I mean, Terry's always talked about the early French New Wave films, which were a big influence on him, Jules and Jim, and some of the films that we all were great admirers of at the time were done with very small, intimate crews. Things were set up well in advance and pretty well, but then there were personality issues, and we started out with one cameraman, Brian Probin, who we had worked with in the past, but it was very hot, and he was not taking it well. So he and Terry agreed to part ways, and then the assistant cameraman came on, and then Tak Fujimoto came in. So we had 3 cameramans during the course of the production. That was a frantic matter of solution, and amazingly the film seems seamless. because Terry had his vision. He has a very unusual methodology. It's the same reason that I remember the script supervisor, who, as I recall, was a very experienced lady who had worked with Orson Welles, and she felt that Terry was shooting in a way that wouldn't match. So she would insist on having the slate turned upside down to show and protest that this was a shot not done right. That kind of thing from old pros, where Terry was a young upstart saying he knew better, and he knew what he was doing. It would be easy for a producer, especially an inexperienced one, to allow the old pros to tell him what to do. And I guess from my 2 or 30 upbringing, I sided with the director. He had same thing with the editor. He had Bob Estrin was the original editor, and he cut the film. And when Terry finished shooting and went to look at what had been put together, he started all over again with Weber to recut the movie. So there were challenges and problems, but Terry seemed very clear on what he wanted, and that made it all work. I think we wanted to get legitimate distribution, which was probably naive on our part. There were films that, again, were, I guess, anomalies at the time, David and Lisa, and the early Cassavetes films, which were distributed theatrically and were shown to the art house audience, and David and Lisa made a big splash and got Oscar nominations and all. So there were examples that gave us the ambition to find distribution. I don't think we ever sort of distributing ourselves. Badlands premiered at the New York Film Festival, and that's what established its reputation. The New York Times review was very strong, even though most reviews weren't, and that's what gave us the momentum to make a distribution arrangement. Other filmmakers in the New York community that I was a part of, which included De Palma and Scorsese, were so impressed and amazed that we could get a studio to pick our film up and to actually pay for what it cost and all that. That was a major accomplishment, and at the time unprecedented. That was like a big deal. And when we made the deal with Warner's, which I think was for $1 million advance, it was like unprecedented in the independent world. I guess the numbers, as I think about it, I think the film maybe cost $750,000 or $800,000, and we sold it to Warner's for $1 million, so that people who had deferments, like Warren, got paid. And I remember Warren saying he'd done like 60 movies and he'd never seen a penny profit or deferment, and here was this little movie, and he actually got his deferment. So that was an accomplishment. Warner's previewed the film on a double bill at the AFCO Theater in Westwood with Blazing Saddles. Not surprisingly, the cards were the worst. I think the guy's name who ran distribution was Greenfield at Warner Brothers, and I remember him saying these are the worst cards in the history of Warner Brothers. They were just dreadful. Most people, nowadays think it was a critically acclaimed film. It wasn't. There were a few very good reviews, including the Times, but by and large the reviews were very negative, and the business, was negligible. Ironically, after the Warner Brothers release of Badlands, which was a failure, we did re-release the film, maybe, I don't know if it was 6 years or 8 years later, and the film, and we arranged our own distribution in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was the least expensive television market, so we could make ads and promote the film on television with modest means. And then we went to Memphis and did the same thing, and then to Dallas. And once the film was proven in Dallas, then Warner Brothers released the film. We had proven that the film could do business. We did the same three-city model with Phantom of the Paradise, with Brian De Palma's film a few years later. And at that time, you could kind of distribute the films yourself. You know, it would be so expensive today and very, very difficult to compete in the marketplace. But at that time, for maybe $15,000, you could establish the film in Little Rock and show that the film could earn its own way. The film's reputation has grown over the years in a way that I never expected. I can't say we were making a living, so it was always a question: is this something I can keep doing? And from an economic point of view, it was challenging. I think without my mom's help, it would have been impossible. But it was always the most exciting, thrilling experience to be part of, and I never wanted to do anything else. After Phantom came out, and Badlands, Sisters Badlands Phantom, those films were all in one way or another successful, either artistically or business-wise. Fox came to us and offered us a deal to pay our overhead and give us a development fund, and so we thought that's great. And we took the deal, and that was the most unproductive period of my life, because we worked at a studio and the management changed after we made the deal. So the new management was, I think Dick Zanuck came in, and he didn't want to do anything as we wanted to do. So we spent 2 or 3 years not making movies. You know, had offices and had money to develop things, but weren't making movies. So after that, I decided I'd rather take my chances and stay independent and get the films made, even if it was not as comfortable.